Yeah, what's up, homie? Just been finishing my dinner. But I also wanted to test to see if the stream even worked. TBH. There's been there was some silly shit that I had to do to get it set up to actually look at uh the bounty text for D&D. OBS never fails to impress me sometimes with how it can screw up basic stuff. So I think it's time to do a little bit of thesaurusing. Cavalcade. Um Imagine if we called it the Immortal, Kian. I don't know. I guess Immortal isn't terrible. We are naming a new class that Three Crow has bountied with his $100 per month like a Chad. So I would say that, like, if I had to break down what Olympian isn't bad. If I had to break down what the class was, because the original idea was Paragon, um, the core idea of the class is that basically you have like the short example or the short sort of like the short explanation of it, the really like quick elevator pitch is strength-based monk. If you had to say it in 3 words, or yeah, 3 words, then you'd say strength-based monk. But it's a lot more than that in other ways. I think it's so it uses ki. It's actually more like a constitution-based monk, really. But it's like a impenetrable physical form, as opposed to relentlessly nimble like the monk is. The power fantasy of this class is meant to be that it can withstand ridiculous onslaught, right? Um, so one of the ideas, like that's like one thematic it's playing with, and then the other thematic it's playing with is like force of character, like being able to compel people with really good like charisma based skill rolls and stuff like that. So that's where, like, you think about Paragon, Exemplar, that kind of thing would be like a really cool name for the secondary part of it. The role playing part of it, that's like that basically the part that would come out more in role play and less in combat. Not to say that there's not a lot of role play potential for the strength based or constitution based monk idea. Just that, like, that will very much of it will be expressed through combat, that one. But I think generally speaking, like, I don't know. I don't have a super august view of the original class names. I think some of them could be improved. Like I talked about, I was actually talking with 3Crow about this when he first pitched me the class. One of the ideas that I sent. Oh, actually, that might have been the audio file that was shortened to 1 second long or whatever instead of the 20+ minute recording I sent him. Unfortunate. Rip. Rest in piss. But it developed my ideas of it anyway. I never did explain that. What's going on, Lucy? Yeah, I feel like I want to reserve Titan for something more deific, if you know what I mean, deified. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm leaning towards either Immortal or Olympian. I add Juggernaut, but it feels almost I know it's Juggernaut is not actually a loaded term. But it feels like a negative thing. And this class is actually kind of gearing, like, you can have evil whatever this class is, right? But it is kind of geared more towards the idea that you should be a force for good. At least that's the initial wording. I might try to tweak a little bit of that so that there's room for both good and evil in the class, because I think that's important. Anyway, I might, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just be like, fuck it. No, like most of these like are good people. Okay, so basically, one of the ideas that I had was, or one of the thoughts that I had in that very long recording that's now lost to Todd, is I had this concept of how the like the fighter is a really bad name for a class, right? Because on the one hand, you'd think, oh, it's archetypal, but on the other hand, you could actually describe paladin, cleric, monk as fighters, right? And also, some fighters go ranged, which is like, okay, that's not very useful, right? War Master. I think Weapon Master is pretty good for fighter. That's my replacement for it. One who war masts. Yeah, Battlemaster could be it. To be fair, my pitch for Weapon Master as opposed to Fighter is actually to be functionally different. It's not just a rename. It's like the Weapon Master, like, I'm gonna try to make it so that you gain benefits as a Weapon Master from like really maxing out how many different weapons you use in a given battle, which will probably be like giving you an epic, like, powerful combat feature like really powerful combat feature later on in the game that you only apply if you haven't used that weapon in the last X number of turns or something. So yeah, anyway. Okay, so I think for now we'll probably choose Immortal. It's all right as a class name. It's not stupendous, but it's probably fine. Maybe we'll come up with something better later. Basically, I want the classes, like, I guess Immortal doesn't immediately make me think of the key expenditure. I don't know. I'll probably think about that later. But it had some good martial class names. I never actually checked out 4th edition. I know that it was maligned by a lot of people, but still, never really quite checked it out. All right, so at first what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to scroll up to the original pitch from 3 Crow, right? And actually, we should probably try to write this in the homebrewery. It's really annoying that I have to constantly sign into this. I don't even remember my password most of the time. There you go, I figured it out. Only took 4 tries. But we can do it here. That's fine. I guess technically this should be above Ironhead in terms of alphanumeric organizational. It's fine by me. Okay. I did see that. I don't remember if I have... I don't think I properly internalized them, but I did see that you sent new stuff. I'll be reviewing it here. It doesn't look like we caps the... Obviously, I'm kind of copy pasting the 3 Crow stuff for now, and then I'm going to tweak it after that. What's $450 for Nintendo? I'm not sure that we would name key something else exactly, but I'm not against it. Oh. I think it was Constitution and Charisma were the primary ones. Usually I just copy the saving throws for multiclassing. We're not really doing multiclassing in our game, but... Dude, I don't know why that happens. It was working fine for a little bit, and then it just vanishes every time. I can't change it either. Settings only apply to SDR video. I don't know what that is. Oh well. I guess we'll just not have a chroma key. I'll fix that later. Maybe. I said that last time. Okay. So we're just going to be data entrying for a little bit, and then once we are a little bit further along, I'm going to use the original pitches for a lot of these. Ah, what's up, Bailiff? How are you? Yeah, Fizz Jungle used to be my epic. But it was League of Legends, so it wasn't really epic. I know that there was a significant change to this one because of the first option there being really strong. Okay. I don't remember what I did. Okay, I see. I just did it as... Okay. Second message here. You get a lot of stuff all the way at second level, which is a bit... Oh, I see. Never mind. That's all part of the same thing. Oh yeah, I guess that's another reason why we wouldn't want to do Titan Shamblers. Titan is a subclass. That kind of makes sense, yeah. Genocidal boomer. I don't know, dude. Your next character is pretty genocidal too. You might want to reconsider that. Okay, so I have now data entryed everything. I will actually review stuff in a moment, but okay, so there were a few changes after that we'll have to document here. But let's take a look at what we actually have, right? So you can scroll up here. Obviously, we have to start renaming stuff from Paragon to Immortal. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look. So I do think that we could probably try to present the class a little bit more like the Undying, like ceaseless, deathless kind of approach. But still, I do think we want to be representing the strong aspect of their, like their force of character, right? So I think that makes sense to do. I also think I probably wrote the descriptions of the other class. Oh no, I guess I did it a little bit different. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. So when we say that they chart their way through history by making memorable impacts on friend and foe alike, remembered not just for their unyielding toughness, but also their force of character. I think that's actually fine, that first sentence. This probably could be a third sentence. Treating them as mortal idols, stand as beacons against all the world that the world sends them. And then this we probably want to tweak a little bit. Okay, I think that's a little bit more flavorful, but also I wanted to make sure I at least implied the whole key thing and the spiritual warrior part. I think that's a pretty solid idea. I'll probably take a look at this a little bit later. Might want to tweak some of those. Okay. I know that, let's see, we had another round of potential changes. Let's see. Also, while I have all of you homies here, one of the ideas I had that I also elucidated in the recording, one of which never got sent, the 3 Crow, I think attacks of opportunity should probably always be disadvantaged. But maybe... No, I think maybe that's fine. I was just saying maybe that should be like, oh, well, don't burn your reaction by doing that. I think it's probably fine, though. Because I think probably as a general rule, martial classes by level 2 or 3 will have an extra reaction in combat, and then eventually all the classes will get an extra reaction, but it'll happen faster for martials, right? Is sort of what I was thinking, to combat the fact that that means that you will obviously not have it. And then, rogues could negate that disadvantage on attacks of opportunity just by nature, because they're like more power. Maybe rogues and monks could do that. I don't know. But like for the average character, especially at level 1, and for all enemies, I think attacks of opportunity being disadvantaged would probably be a good thing, because as it is, attacks of opportunity do kind of slow the game down a lot. Not necessarily in terms of combat pacing, but in terms of, like, I mean, they literally slow movement. They reduce movement in combat by players, because the players don't want to move. They'll get attacked, So making it a lower percentage chance to happen, I think would be a good one. But I'm interested in feedback on that. Maybe I haven't thought some obvious issue with that through. And I think maybe there could be certain, like, maybe if you wield a certain weapon, you would naturally benefit from the opportunist feature, which would be the removal of the disadvantage. And so what would happen as a result of that would basically be like certain weapons would be deployed to try to keep more nimble melees away from squishies. Right? So you try to like set up a phalanx almost, right? I don't know. Something like that I think is a cool one. I usually kind of ignore attacks of opportunity, not all the time, but like I would say half of the time that there could be an attack of opportunity is probably, it's like 50% of the time the enemies will move disregarding attacks of opportunity. A hallway of enemies and taking like one hit because I see in disadvantage. Well, again, I think negating the disadvantage part would be not ubiquitous, but like not uncommon. So what I mean by that is, like, for pretty much I haven't gotten to this point exactly yet in all of the combat that you guys have been facing, but I've been building towards the point where every NPC, every humanoid enemy that you face has a class with at least one level and a race, so they benefit from the racial features. I'm building towards that point where I've built out the bestiary so that like when I'm dropping people in, they're not just orc fighter or whatever, orc warrior, right? They're not a classless humanoid. Now maybe I'll actually find out that it's still good to have classless humanoids as like fodder, almost like minions in 4th edition. Minus the fact that they would die in one hit. They might not necessarily die in one hit. So that alone would mean that like if there's rogues or monks or whatever that can the nimble marshals that would be able to try to negate that disadvantage, that would be more common. The other thing though is that certain weapons would just negate it anyway. Like maybe I think like spears, pole arms in general would probably negate the disadvantage. But like a general sword or whatever would probably be disadvantaged, right? Well, I do think Balethal that it might just be like a thing where in a VTT it's a lot easier to run those kinds of things because you see everything that they have and they correspond to buttons that you can press. And as long as you kind of know certain passive details about things too, and you can hold all of that in your head, it's not that difficult to be like, I'm going to do this, you know? I will say, you guys surprise me a lot with your role playing decisions, but you very, and I don't think this is a dig at you guys. I'm not saying this is like a, I know everything, but I'm very rarely like, I have got a plan for the NPCs that like the players foil in combat. They usually just win through like better dice or better coordination, but like the party doesn't usually like they've maybe outsmarted is a strong word. They've surprised me with their how plucky they can be with certain decisions that they make, and like certain things that they pay attention to and with role playing checks and stuff. But they don't necessarily like it's not. I don't usually design a plan for the NPCs that's super contingent on like the party doing a thing, like going a certain way. Like they're kind of like agnostic to any enemy. You guys like eventually I'm going to kind of understand how you guys do, and then there's going to be, assuming there's a reasonable lore reason, a diegetic explanation for why the enemies would know your guys' fighting style. If they do know that, then that would be a case where like, okay, maybe there's going to be an assassin group or a bounty hunter or whatever, and they're going to kind of like know what to expect from you, and that would be like me trying to strategize around what you guys are doing. But usually the plans that I do, I'm not like I'm not really brewing something up where it's like, yeah, this is really important that they don't do this or that the players go a certain way in combat, right? And so I'm pointing that out because like I don't have to worry too much about holding in my head whatever the players can do. I do consider that when making individual moves, but when I'm first drafting the attack plans or the combat strategy, or like kind of gut reacting to things, I don't really consider what the players can do. I just consider what can these guys do, and what are their capabilities, and like what items do they have, and what spellcasting can they do, and all that stuff, right? And I think that's cool and just generally better. While you guys are still a plucky upstart underground, like you're not like a well-known, notorious group anymore, or yet, rather, I should say. You're not super well known in the realm, and so it would not really make sense for the people to have studied footage like in a competitive game or something and then like, yeah, I know exactly what build order he's going to do. Like that doesn't really compute here, right? So it makes more sense for them to rely on their own combat strategy, and that's what I do. And so I say that just because I think it's important to remember to mention that we face an enemy who's used to fighting people. Yeah, there you go. Can't know our style if you leave no survivors. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, I just figured I'd point that out. All right. I just wanted to sit down a little bit. My feet were getting sore. I was standing up casting for hours and hours and hours. Okay. So yeah, I'm just pointing all of the strategery out because I think it is good to remember that we are not yet at a point where the enemy is like expecting. I have to, on behalf of the enemy, expect what you guys do. When I do that, I'm sure I will be surprised because that's just the nature of the beast. But I haven't gotten to that point yet. I mean, maybe as an impartial observer, I've been surprised, but like nothing that would outmode a plan that the enemies have, other than like they didn't plan specifically for you guys to do something, right? I'm lingering on this point a little bit too long, but I'm just meaning that to say that like when I'm designing the combat encounters, currently I can afford to be like, yeah, everything is a class. Everything has like items that I've got to remember to use and all this other stuff because I don't have to worry about what you guys are doing. I just react to it. So yeah, anyway, I figured that's worth pointing out. All right. So we've done the Immortal flavor text. We have to take a look at all of their stuff over here on this side of the column eventually. Looks like the main thing that got changed here, I think we might have tweaked force of character a little bit. Oh, I see. So let's take a look at this. So we'll paste in the updated stuff where feasible, right? I think this means... No, actually, we still have a little bit of space there. That's beautiful. You can fit a surprising amount of text in these pages. Okay, so if we take a look at the things that you have here, in instantaneous movement is called bound, right? And then sudden rush is called gigantic leap. And I'll paste that as well. But that's, of course, what gets pinched off over there. Oops. That's all right. We'll take a look at that later. Yeah, I don't really know what that part means. Oh, I see. Here we go. I was going to ask you... Okay, I'll take a look at that later. Monk unarmed attacks become magical at 6th level for the purposes of overcoming resistance to non-magical attacks. So we find a couple of that either as a base class feature or a feature specific to the Titan path. Monks also get a 5th level feature in addition to their extra attack. Open to suggestions. Okay. Kinetic recharge. Tremendous power behind your assaults trickles back into your reserves on successful strikes. When you roll maximum damage on a damage die, or when you crit strike, you can choose between recovering 1 key point or hit die. That's pretty interesting. Okay. So can you explain to me, I know this sounds really silly to you probably, but what is a hit die then? Because I thought, my understanding is, you spend hit dice to take short rests and restore your health. But there's a thing in here that interacts with hit dice in a weird way. That's what, if that's all that it is, then that's fine. That's what I thought. Oh, I'm guessing Neblime has found the new architect. Yes. Yes, he has. Sorry. The Cosmo is leaking. Get a pool of hit dice, one per class level, that you would typically only spend to heal on short rest. This treats them as a resource that you can spend for damage reduction. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm going to tell you guys, I have all of these ideas for like how short rests feel really weird. I don't know. I got to think about that a little bit. Because I can probably design around that as a designer, as a director, as the game director, right, GM? But short rest just feels strange in general. And the other thing that I think is kind of wonky is that if you do a long rest, then you still have to have somebody out on watch, right? Even if you're doing a short rest, it's probably a good idea to have somebody out for watch. Yeah. Yeah, I can comprehend that. It's just like, I'm not saying I would axe the system. I'm just saying like maybe it could use some tweaking. All right, let's take a look at this. So your physicality rivals that of the strongest plate. Your body well suited for withstanding even the most savage of blows. See, that's kind of the kind of flavor text I would save for when you're really epic. For a level 1 feature, that's pretty crazy. I probably will. I think I will for later on. Yeah, Shambler. While we're at it, adding 7 more hours to the rest doesn't really seem like it would fix that. Yeah, I could design a setting around the idea that like basically that. It's a little more complicated than that in my head, but basically that. Yeah, I thought you knew that. Pretty sure Moxie is the word I'm thinking. Yeah. Well, those who survive are rewarded. I think it checks out. Save on a little bit of text space here. I'm going to remove the redundant explanation of the idea that, like, you can't do that again later. Hopefully that makes sense. I hope that I can manage to get to the Goliath in this stream, but there's a chance that I spend so much time tweaking this one that, I got less than an hour to finish things up here, so I may have to come back for the Goliath stuff. Okay. Spend 1 key point as the bonus action to strengthen your sprint. Movement speed is increased by 30 feet until the end of your turn. Push through other creatures that block your path. Ooh. Kind of bowl them over. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I think that works out pretty well. So when you made the decision to make it so that they can't stack with other sources of temporary hit points, what was the thought process behind that? Because if you decide to really big yourself up and like somebody gives you false life and you spend a key point to get temp HP, like because as far as I can tell, it would probably be fine. Key points every turn. Well, they only have a certain number of key points, right? So it's 1 plus like 2 or 3 for a level 1 character that have like 3 to 4 on average, I would imagine. Probably 3 on average. 4 would be like when you're really maxing your character out. And you get your key points on any short or long rest, so I guess theoretically you could have a lot. Maybe your key points should only recover partially. Maybe you should get half of it on a short rest if that's a concern, if short rests are becoming pretty common. But we don't. I think we've had more long rests than short rests in these campaigns so far. It might be a little bit close, but I think long rests are edging them out. So maybe just handily beating them. I can't really. I haven't been keeping tabs on that, but it feels right to say that. I think for now, I'm just going to say that you can't stack it with itself, which I think is probably a fine thing. But other sources of temp HP, I think, is probably fine, right? Because you're probably not going to. I'm trying to think of other sources of temp HP. I think so far I've only seen. I've made some items that do it. There are some base items that do it. And then, of course, there's False Life. And there's Blood Knight stuff. So, like, it would require a particular subclass of a Blood Knight to share it with you. It would require a Warlock. I can't remember if False Life is a self-cast or you can cast it on anyone. I can't remember. I kind of thought you could cast it on anyone, but it might be that might not be right. No, it's actually yourself. Okay. Well, yeah. So I actually don't know how you would get other sources of temp HP then. And stack themselves expire after 1 minute. All right. Unfortunately, the Gigantic Leaps text is still off screen, which is like I would love to just somehow contain it all in one area, but that ain't happening. So we've got to do this. Okay. I feel like this is a solid. I'm like reading through it. I think it's a solid thing. So the gigantic leap thing, I feel like difficult terrain is pretty rare, so it's pretty cool to give them the opportunity to do that. One thing that I was also just thinking is if I decide to go with that idea of attacks of opportunity providing disadvantage, difficult terrain could maybe change that. Or I guess maybe difficult terrain could... Yeah, I get, like, if it's difficult terrain, they're moving slower, right? So it would be easier to hit. So yeah, I think maybe that would be a cool thing to throw in there as like an extra situational rule. It's a little crunchy, but I think it's fine. You know, if we think of crunch as like a lot of systems interacting with other systems. But yeah, I think that's fine personally. All right. So let me just take a quick look over this and try to mentally map this onto other classes. So we've basically got all the level 1 stuff onto one page, the exception being this gigantic leap thing that's extending out, but we can remember what that does. I don't think any of these key things are things that the... I don't think any of them are things that the monk uses, so that's already pretty good. Because even though they're completely different classes, there's a lot of copy pasting happening in D&D between classes, I've noticed. Extra attack here is later than it is for monk, which is kind of neat. So I'm going to compare this to the Ironhead briefly. The Ironhead has a very different set of changes, or a very different and probably more limited set of level 1 things by comparison, right? So the Ironhead has you move 15 feet towards a creature or more, you'll automatically get advantage on a melee attack. And then if you hit, you can spend your bonus action to charge them, which will either knock them prone or push them back by up to 10 feet. So, you know, it's supposed to be the D&D equivalent of a football player. That is the point of the class. The Ironhead is already a pretty cool, like kind of like a glass cannon type guy. A bruiser. And then there's the other feature that it gets at level 1, which is that when it's reduced to 0 hit points, they automatically are able to take a full action, interrupting all turns in the process. And then they will fall unconscious at the end of their action. So that's obviously like a pretty big deal there. It's like they steal their action from the next turn, or whatever. So that's the main idea that I would say has a core place in the idea of how it works, right? Is like they're meant to kind of get in the front, and if they get reduced to 0 HP, they can still make one more mad dash out to safety, or they can like do a heroic move where they charge towards somebody, you know, attack and throw, and then run the rest of the way or whatever. That's like the kind of shit they can do, right? Or they can, like, in a fit of rage, they can charge towards an enemy, kill them, and then use their bonus action to dash to charge for more, you know? Like that kind of shit, right? Well, I guess bonus action dash is actually a rogue thing only, so never mind. So this is a lot less going on. I mean, they do have a couple other things, like their iron helm lets them do certain things differently. There's like an iron helm of rebounding, where if they take a melee attack hits them, they can push the target back away 5 feet, which obviously helps them with the whole attack of opportunity thing. Yep, that's true too. They do have 1d12 HP, which is like the Blood Knight and the Barbarian. I think especially because you're going to be I'm guessing you're going to pair this with your Goliath character. Your Goliath will probably have like a +2 to con natively, which means I'm pretty sure you're going to be capable of a +2, not modifier, +2 absolute to con, which I think means you'll be able to get a +3 mod pretty easily. I can't remember if that means you can get a +4 or not. you might be able to. But setting that aside, that means that you're going to have a lot of key points, right? So you're going to be able to use a lot of the features that you have here, like a lot of the key features based on that. And your unarmed defense is going to be more powerful, and your force of character is going to be more powerful. So I think that's all fine. I'm just pointing that out because, like, in your specific use case, as well as more general use cases, the Immortal does have a lot of stuff going on for it at level 1, and then it immediately gets its subclass at level 2. I think it should have Key and Force of Nature and probably Unarmed Defense at level 1, because Force of Character. Key is just a core aspect of the class, obviously. So it should always, core aspects of the class should always be available at level 1, and it's really dumb when, like, the Sorcerer Magic was level 2, and the Key was level 2 for monks, and Paladin Smite is level 2, and none of that makes any sense. So obviously those core class elements should be available from level 1, and you should just be at level 1 for a bit longer than in most campaigns, maybe a lot longer than in most campaigns, and you should be learning how to pilot your class, pilot your character, both in role-playing and combat terms, because combat is an extension of role-play. Anyway, that's all to one side. And Force of Character also seems really core to the character, right? I guess maybe you could argue that Unarmed Defense could actually be a level 2 thing. Unarmed Defense could be the thing that gets moved out. Moved up to level 2. And then you could put the subclass to level 3. But Unarmed Defense would probably need to give you something if you're not using no armor. Because if you're not using no armor, then, like, if you're using light or medium armor, because I think those are no, you only have light armor proficiency. Huh. Would it ever be useful to go to wear light armor as an Immortal then? Is this kind of a bait where it's like, actually, you shouldn't be? Trade off for the Immortals, you do need other stats than Con to function as a character. So you have to choose, do I sacrifice basic strength to hit damage for more key and HP? Yeah, I mean, I am always fine to test stuff, but it's entirely possible that, given the fact that you're a Goliath and an Immortal, and I am going to try to work with a player character that's large instead of medium, you might be stealing the spotlight more than just a little bit, considering you can do all this stuff. Like, if we decide our next campaign is going to be maximum homebrew, people can play as Weapon Masters, and the Renewed Sorcerer, and Ironheads, and Blood Knights, and Immortals. And maybe I'll come up with another couple classes or whatever, right? And we've got so much time until then, so I'm not really that worried about it. Right? Or maybe we don't have so much time. I don't know. Maybe people will want to do it. I'm just kind of thinking about, like, the things that you're capable of doing, and I don't want there to be... I don't want to delay the epic parts of the character, or the class identity, but I also don't want the class to be so powerful at level 1 that it's like... and you are right, that, like, you can't... You're not going to do that much damage as an Immortal, and that's intentional. You can subclass as a Titan if you want to be more of a fighter, but there's also, we're going to come up with other subclasses. We'll co-author those. So I think if we're thinking about moving Force of Character, I would move it to level 2, and I would encourage moving the subclass to level 3. It's not like a hard requirement. Some subclasses are available earlier in the default, obviously. Like, some of them are available at level 1, and some of them are available at level 2. I actually wouldn't hate if it was standardized that subclasses always come out at level 3. Because I think that if you are in a party that graduates to level 3, that should be a signal that you guys are actually starting to become notorious. I think the Paladin partner had a very imperfect scaling in its first arc, right? Its first season, so to speak, where you had players. You guys got from level 1 to level 3 in like the time span of like less than a week in game or in like story time, right? In game time. So I think that there's an incongruous amount of movement there. But like you guys are probably close enough to level 3 in ADS that by this point, like I think I said it before, like 4 more sessions or less, you'll probably be level 3 in that party. And that's significant because it means that you guys have earned reputation. And so that's kind of where I'm thinking about, like, your characters had to go through a lot of experiences together as a party, and just individually, that I think that sort of cementing that you guys are an adventuring group now, that you guys are like notorious to some degree in the realm that you come from, in that area you come from, kind of icing on the cake there, or like underscoring the point by giving you the subclass at that level, I think is, if we're going to go with that idea that like level 1 to level 2 are like kind of a ragtag group or whatever, but level 3 is like, no, you guys are an adventuring group now, time to get kind of serious about it, here's your subclass. It doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be a massive spike in power or utility. I think depending on the subclass, it could be. And maybe it's something that actually scales later on afterwards. But since we're thinking about lowering the max level, so to speak, the average level that you're going to get to at max would probably be 6, like we talked about, 5 or 6. And leaning towards 6 if we're going to use a lot of the default D&D stuff. Arath can finally choose his pact type. Yeah, so I think if damage is a concern, it shouldn't be the solution that you have to get to a subclass that gives you damage. I certainly wasn't imagining that every Immortal subclass was going to give you some way of doing damage. I was thinking that the Titan was probably the exception in that respect. Now, I could, of course, like, you know, in some ways this is your creation, right? So maybe I was just off base with that prediction. But if that ends up being true, that more subclasses give you utility or durability or something like that instead of outright damage, then maybe the damage needs to come from something else. Lucy says subclass should be a level 1 thing. I don't know, man. I think you get a lot of stuff with these classes that, as I'm redesigning them, to the point where adding subclass on top of that would be pretty powerful. Well, I mean, obviously, Shambler, we would be taking stuff that is reasonable to have in the end stages of the levels and kind of trickling them down to the earlier levels. So just when I say, like, we're going to end at level 6, that doesn't mean that, like, anything past level 6 is not feasible. It just means it would have to be reintegrated, right? Unarmed damage die became a base class feature at level 2, and the Titan Strike key pumping for damage was the subclass feature. Then if it's a 3rd level, bump the die to 1d8 plus con. So let me think if I can understand that. So unarmed damage die by default, what is it, 1d4 by default? And then at level 2, you're arguing give it 1d6. And then at 1d, it becomes 1d8 at level 3. Does it become 1d8 at level 3 no matter what? Or is that a subclass? I think 1d8 plus con as a default would probably be fine. Oh, it's just straight up 1 plus strength mod. Okay. All right, well, I'll tell you what. Am I right to say that you're expecting that your primary damage would either be your unarmed attacks or your martial weapon? As a Goliath, I think you're probably going to just naturally be able to clobber people for bludgeoning damage. You put it at level 2? Oh, you put the subclass at level 2, yeah. So it goes from 1 plus strength mod to D8 at the level 2 thing. I think just as a native class feature, it should probably be at least 1d4 at level 1. And at level 2, we can scale it to 1d6. You only get 1 attack until 5th level. Yeah, so I guess if you're not using a martial weapon, you're probably going to be lacking in damage, even if we decide to make it so that like Immortal is 1d4. And so the 3d4 is 3 attacks, right? And they burn a ki point for that. I think monks seem to have less ki than immortals would probably have. But I could be wrong about that. Maybe that's just the absence of ki usage in the ADS campaign that is making me feel that way. Well, no, I meant that like you said that they do 3d4, and I assume that's 3 attacks. And if they're using the 3rd attack, it's because they did Flurry of Blows, which is a ki point, if I'm not mistaken. Like they do it basic attack, then ki point Flurry of Blows for 2 attacks, and that would be 3d4. Right. And so that requires a ki point. I think if you're doing as much damage, so you're talking about 2nd level, and you're also talking about Immortal 2nd level with regards to your subclass thing. As it currently stands. I think when we're talking about the damage, I think in a super ideal world, the Immortal doesn't mind not doing much damage. But I see your point about, like, you don't... Okay, I have an idea. Let me think about how I would describe this, though. Yeah, I mean... I can kind of see where you're coming from on that. I also think that, like, maybe the answer is to make it so that you can attack. If you choose unarmed, then you can attack multiple times, but you would require your bonus action for the 2nd attack. And I think that would be useful because you can still wield a weapon if you want your bonus action for something else. But maybe the damage ceiling of the unarmed attack with the bonus action is higher than, martial or simple weapon, but bonus action lets me do other things, right? Anyway, the feature that I'm thinking about here is that, like, I want to reward immortals for surrounding themselves with enemies. And I was thinking that maybe at level 2, there would be a feature that would get them the ability to... Maybe this is too strong? But if we're trading it for the subclass at level 2 and we're delaying the subclass to level 3, this might not be too strong. The Immortal... Let's turn the Immortal into the deployed Madrigal. For any enemy within weapon range, which includes a reach weapon, like a polearm, but also includes their, or maybe it would just start as you're 5 feet from you. For every enemy that surrounds you, right? You can attack them. in I don't know, maybe that's a little bit too dexterity focused. Maybe that feels a little bit too like I'm attacking multiple targets or whatever. Maybe instead what it should be is that for every enemy surrounding you, you get extra damage. Yeah, I think your last message about the key point bonus and stuff like that makes a lot of sense for general action economy. We can probably add that we can roll that into like a level 1 thing. But my level 2 feature idea here is basically like... I'm going to name it something really generic, but I'm going to rename it later. So, starting Ant second level? No. So it's just as simple as that. Starting at second level, when you roll for damage with an unarmed attack, roll 1 extra damage die for every hostile within 5 feet of you. So you are encouraged to go seek out individual, like a bunch of threats, right? But then you are focusing your smash onto one person. You know what I mean? Now, should this be a thing that you just get and it's not a limited resource? It's not a key point. It's not like a thing you got to spend. It's just an inherent, innate passive. Or should it be like, this thing can only happen once per proficiency bonus or whatever? I don't know. We could roll it into the con mod, but I honestly, I think it's probably fine as just an innate thing. Like, maybe that makes them busted as fuck, but I can't currently see how it would be that much more powerful, because at best, they can one-tap one enemy in melee range under specific circumstances. I honestly don't think that needs to be a resource. Yeah, that's kind of what I think, right? We let you focus on one enemy per turn, right? We can say that this effect can only happen once per turn. That way that you can't use your bonus action and then smash somebody else with the same bonus, right? I think that's probably fine. Because then we're going to come back up here and say... Is this what it is for Monk at default, or is it D4? They get 1d4, don't they? So giving you 1d6... it does let you get 2d6. But there's no damage bonus? We could do 1d6 plus con. D4, D6, D8, D10, D12. So, I mean, obviously we're going to reduce the levels, but we could still end up at the same end location. Or maybe not. Because damage scaling can be pretty ridiculous sometimes. So, I guess the one thing I'm a little bit concerned about with this approach... Maybe, so... Maybe we would do this. So it still starts out as 1d4, but it can improve to 1d6 either at level 2 or level 3. I guess level 3 would probably be fine. Because you have that bonus action thing. The reason I'm thinking this is this might still end up being better anyway than 1d6, by the way. That's kind of the spoiler here. But, like, action economy is such that you probably do still want to... You probably still want to wield a weapon, just in case. But you could be brandishing a short sword. Or, yeah, I think you could do a short sword just fine. Maybe also, I think long swords can be wielded versatilely, right? So you could brandish a versatile or one-handed weapon, and still use your other hand to punch, and then punch a second time. So that would still be allowed in the rules, so you could be pretty flexible. The reason I'm saying this is because I don't want Immortals to never use melee weapons. By doing this, I don't want Immortals to be like pigeonholed into using unarmed attacks. But I think maybe that would be where we get to. So. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I think if we did 1d4 plus strength modifier, but then we eventually added con later at level 2 or level 3 as a general feature and not a class feature, then that would be good. And maybe you could maybe make it so that like the subclass for Titan gives you like you double your con mod instead of just adding it once. Anyway, that's just like some random thought. Like, I definitely don't want to be... I don't want to make it so that you go ham on unarmed and there's no point ever making anything else, right? Like, if we take a quick look at, like, Benson, he's got a +2 to strength and a +1 to con. And so, like, that's a character that's not specifically being kitted out for that. Whereas if we were to load up Darix, which I'm not doing right now, but I could... I think he's got a +1 to strength, but a +3 to con or something. I don't remember. Maybe it's +2 to strength, +3 con. Anyway, if a character with those stats, which is entirely feasible as a thing, decided to do that, that would be pretty fucking difficult. So. Oh, okay. I did not remember that. So that is a good reminder. Yeah. Yeah, you're right about that, actually. That would be really helpful for the Titan, is that they could still wield a weapon. Yeah, okay. I guess you wouldn't want it so that they add their con mod. But was it that you spend your key in order to add your con mod, or was it a passive thing? I'm kind of a fan of passive stuff, but it's all those rules that you got to remember to add to your fucking dice roll every time, so maybe not. I don't know. I also have to think about like the flexibility of how you can imply it or whatever. But that's the player's job to remember, not mine. I'll design complex systems. You remember it. I feel like we're going in the right direction for the Immortal, though. Like, even if it ends up being that he wants to roll with unarmed strikes for damage early on, I think that's fine. Also, I do think that by being a Goliath, it's pretty good that you get on the spiritual warfare, like the unarmed defense part of the unarmored defense part of spiritual warfare. It's pretty good that you get that because the con modifier part. Because as a Goliath, you'll probably have at least a -1 to Dex. So you might have a -2 to Dex. I have to think about that. Because I'm thinking +2 con, +1 strength. And then if I do -2 Dex, or -1 Dex, -1 some other stat, I would still let the player pick one stat to increase that isn't con. They could increase strength, wisdom, charisma, or intelligence. I don't necessarily want to make them a dumb or unwise species. Maybe they would have a tough time with charisma, but if they have a -1 to Dex and a -1 to charisma, they might not be a great fit for the Immortal. So I'm also kind of like pre-thinking about that a little bit. Key version of Divine Smite, you can pump key up to your class level to up the damage of a single strike. Ah, okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That does let you add a lot of power to it, that's for sure. We're already kind of starting off with Ascendosaur D&D stuff. We're already kind of starting off with that same idea of Cosmonarchy in a way. Like, I could see a lot of parallels. Like, it started off as just, hey, let's just play 5th edition and we'll tweak it along the way, to now it's like, I'm imagining the future where, like, Three Crow describes how he pumps up his key to power up his Titan's strike. And, like, he does that, and then, like, Balathal describes how his Blood Knight uses this feature, everybody's doing their own shit. and it's just it rolls because you guys know it. So yeah, the urge of creation. Yeah, no kidding. That's my fucking byline. Put that on my goddamn gravestone. Succumbed to the urge of creation. Yeah, you left me some direction for that, which is helpful. So, all right. I'm trying to look for any other low hanging fruit that I can nab along the way here, but I do think that this is a pretty solid situation for the spiritual warfare thing. So we did decide that Juggernaut's Gaze should be a level 2 feature, and we're still going to keep Juggernaut's Physicality on. I'll probably rename that at some point, but that is a third feature, which is Flesh of Steel. Do we want to move Force of Character anywhere? Because like I was just talking about how it feels like Immortals can do a lot at the beginning. And guess what? I went ahead and added even more stuff for them to do with their unarmed strike and their bonus action unarmed strike thing. So I haven't actually rectified the original problem. In fact, I've probably just made it worse. But in a way, it's also epic. So I just want to keep chabs on that. It might even be worth it to consider migrating one of these options. Like Gigantic Leap does give you a lot of mobility and utility. And I wonder if maybe enabling it at level 2, at tier 2, I'm thinking of Cosmonarchy again. Maybe that should be a tier a level 2 thing as opposed to a level 1 thing. So that could be another thing you get at level 2, assuming we're not giving the subclass at level 2. Well, I do want Key to be there, because if you don't have that, so imagine you don't have Key. Now you have unarmed attacks that you can do as a bonus action, okay? And your unarmed attacks have 1d4 plus strength, okay? But and you have that Force of Character thing, which you can do out of combat and sometimes in combat. Okay. But you don't really have much else, so it's just punching. So I think Key should be there. I also think Key is super critical to the class, and I just went on that rant earlier about how critical core aspects of the class should be available at level 1 so people can start to figure out how to use them. But I think it's probably fine to do the temp hit HP and the bound as the only things you can do with Key, and then keep Gigantic Leap to level 2. Or we could move Gigantic Leap to level 2 because it's powerful, and maybe even make it slightly more powerful as a result of that, or we just leave it as it is. And we could add like another third thing you could do if we felt like you didn't have enough things. You think bound as well as leap? I mean, oh, okay. I guess bound is a bonus action. And jump is a full action. So when you do Gigantic Leap, it's basically a free action because it only matters if you also spend your action. I think that's fine. I was just thinking, what if we made it so that bound and maybe also reconstituting aura were full actions at level 1, and then at level 3 or whatever, at level 2 or something, you were able to convert them into bonus actions somehow. Oh yeah. So actually, I guess Gigantic Leap itself should be an action then? You're spending your key point. Would you describe this as an action, or would you describe this as intended to be a bonus action? The other two are bonus actions, but some of them can be different, right? Yeah, I mean, bound is really powerful. But I think if it were an action, because you're getting so much utility out of it, it would probably be fine, right? You're not dealing damage to them, but... I get you. Attack during the leap. Yeah, I mean, well, I guess if we decide that it's a bonus action, then that's fine. I think Bound should be an action for how strong it is, even factoring in the idea that it could be something that we delay to level 2. I think it would still be really strong because you got to think about the fact that you're moving really fast through enemies, potentially displacing them, right? So I do try to imagine in combat encounters where the party is dealing with one of this class. That's what I did with like Ironhead and Blood Knight. And it's only imaginary, so I can only do so much. But shadowboxing those kinds of scenarios can actually be pretty useful. Like, I'm trying to imagine what the party would do if that was a bonus action, where they all get bowled over and then it still punches one of them. That's pretty strong. So, right, yeah. I still think the idea of Gigantic Leap being level 2 is probably fine because it's a bonus action, therefore it is more valuable for the action economy and it still gives you mobility, right? I think that's still fair. I don't think that's too bad. I'm just gonna say key. I'll probably shade in some lore and flavor text to a lot of these descriptions in a bit, another session or whatever. But gotta wrap this up now. Okay. Um. So pushing this stuff to level 3, we'll have to revisit that. Obviously, the subclass stuff is handled elsewhere as well. Okay. All right. So I will go ahead and take this digest here, and I forget where to share. Yeah, we can do that. Okay. Gonna go ahead and send up the okay. Okay, so hopefully everybody's interested and excited about the way that stuff is going to work out. I still have to take a look at the subclasses and probably look at the level 3 stuff. But I think that Juggernaut's Gaze is super epic. I think keeping Force of Character at level 1 is good for role-playing, and that the key stuff here is these two are reasonable, in my opinion. I'll try to tweak the formatting on some of that stuff. But yeah, I hope you guys are liking the way it's looking so far. I think it'll be cool. We'll continue finishing stuff up. Obviously, I have to data entry the stuff in here at some point. We will do that later. But GG's. Hope you guys had fun. I'm out of here. I gotta go to do other things. Also, apparently my dropped frame count is almost 40%. Hopefully it wasn't that laggy in practice, but apparently my OBS is having some struggle times today. Yeah, thanks for your support, homie, and we'll be back at some other point. I don't know if it'll be this week, but sometime soon, so that I can satisfy the other part of it, which is, I mean, I have to continue working on this class anyway, but I also want to satisfy the Goliath stuff, so we'll probably stream that. Cool. GG, peace.